Good day everyone. My name is Gerald Mamasalanang. I am from Diploma Information Technology 11 and I am from Polytechnic University of the Philippines, Taguig branch. So, today I'm going to show you two problems that I will solve using a flowchart, and I'm going to explain to you how it works by showing you the simulation. So, let's get started. So, the first problem is write a flowchart to find and display the factorial given or the inputted number. So, focus to the flowchart. First is start, then we enter a number, then initialize the entered number, then initialize fact as 1, then we're gonna do a decision. Is n equal to 0 or 1? If no, display fact. If yes, display fact. Then stop. So our given here is number. So I'm gonna give it a variable name n. The unknown is inputted number or the factorial. So I'm gonna give this a variable name fact. The process is initialize n as the entered number. Second is initialize fact as 1. Check if n is equal to 0 or 1. If it is, then the factorial is 1. And the fact remains 1. If n is not 0 or 1, do the loop process by calculating the factorial. Finally, display the value of fact, which should represent the factorial of the inputted number. Now, I'm going to show you the simulation for us to be able to understand it well. So, here it is. So, focus to the first example there. So, I input 0. Initially, n is set to 0 and the fact is set to 1. So, the condition is n is equal to 0 or 1? The condition is met because 0 is equal to 0. It means it is yes. The factorial calculation is no changes are made to the fact, which means the fact remains 1 and the displayed result remains 1. Next example, I input number 1. N is set to 1 and fact is set to 1. The condition is met because 1 is equal to 1, which means it is yes. Now, factorial calculation didn't change. Fact is unchanged, which means fact remains 1 and the displayed result is 1. Next example, I input 2. N is set to 2 and fact is set to 1. The condition is n equal to 0 or 1? The condition is not met this time because 2 is not equal to 0 or 1, which means the fact is updated by multiplying it by n, which results in fact becoming 2. So, fact is equal to 2. The factorial number of number 2 is 2. Next example is, I inputted number 3. N is set to number 3 and fact is set to number 1. Our condition is n. Is it n is equal to 0 or 1? The condition, once again, is not met because 3 is not equal to 0 or 1, which means fact is updated by multiplying by n. Now, the display result will be 6. Why? Because the factorial number of 3 is number 6. The second to the last example, I inputted number 4. N is set to 4 and fact is set to 1. The condition is not met because 4 is not equal to 0 or 1. Fact is updated by multiplying n, so which resulted in fact becoming 4. Now, the factorial number of 4 is 24. So, we're gonna display result number 24. Finally, the last example, I inputted number 5. N is set to 5 and fact is set to number 1. The condition is n is equal to 0 or 1? The condition is not met because 5 is not equal to 0 or 1. The fact is updated by multiplying by n, which result it becoming 5. So, the factorial of number 5 is 120, which means displayed result will be 120. So, that's the problem number 1. Now, proceed to problem number 2. So, problem number 2. Write a flowchart to find and display the greatest common divisor or GCD of two given numbers. So, focus to the flowchart. First, start. Then we enter the number 1. Then, enter the number 2. Then we're gonna do a decision. Are both numbers 0? If no, calculate A mod B and store it in A. If yes, set a larger number. Set B and smaller number. Calculate A and mod B and store it in A. And then we're gonna do a decision. Is B a 0? If no, display GCD as A. If yes, display GCD A. Then stop. So the given here is the two numbers. So I'm gonna give the two number variable name n1 and n2. So the unknown or the variable that we need to find is the GCD. So we're gonna give this a variable name GCD. So the process is first determine which of the two input is larger and assign it to variable A. Next, determine which of the two input numbers is smaller and assign it to variable B. Next, calculate the remainder when A is divided by B and store the result back in A. Check if B is equal to 0, if this GCD is found and the value is stored in GCD. Display the value of GCD as the final result. So, I'm gonna show you the simulation for us to be able to understand it properly. So, there it is. So, in the first example, I inputted number 24 and 26. Initialization. Initially, A is set to 24 and B is set to 36. Both the condition, both number are not 0, so flowchart proceeds. The flowchart swaps the value of A and B, making A is equal to 36 and B is equal to 24. This is done to set the process of finding this GCD. Now, display the GCD of 24 and 36, which is 12. So, that's how we find the GCD. For the next example is, we input 48 and 46. Initially, A is set to 48 and B is set to 60. Both numbers are not 0, so flowchart proceed. The flowchart swaps and value of A and B, making A is equal to 6 and B is equal to 48. Display the GCD of 48 and 60, which is 12. In the next example, I inputted 17 and 8. Initially, A is set to number 17 and B is set to 8. Both numbers are not 0, so flowchart proceed. The flowchart performs the operation A is equal to A percentage B, which calculates the remainder when 17 is divided by 8. Then result in A becoming 1 and B remains 8. Display the GCD of 17 and 18, which is 1, which is the displayed GCD in the example. For the next example is, I input 5 and 0. Initially A is set to B. Initially A is set to 5 and B is set to 0. The conditions. The first number is not 0, but the second number is 0. Since the number is 0, there is no changes in the values of A and B. Therefore, we're gonna proceed displaying the GCD. The GCD is calculated as 5, which values of A, in this case, this will be the displayed GCD. GCD is equal to number 5. For the second to the last example, I inputted 0 and 12. Initially, A is set to 0 and B is set to 12. The first number is 0, but the second number is not 0. Since the first number is 0, there's no changes in the values of A and B. So, the displayed GCD is calculated as 12, which is the value of B in this case. So, our displayed GCD is equal to 12. Now, for the final example, I inputted both A and B as 0. Both A and B are set to 0. Both numbers are 0. Since both numbers are 0, there's no changes in values of A and B. Then, the GCD calculated as 0, which is the value of A or B, in this case, will the displayed GCD, which means displayed GCD is equal to 0. So, hopefully, you understand our discussion for today. Thank you for listening. Once again, I am Gerald Mamasalanang from Diploma Information Technology 1. Thank you.